This is a meeting of the Public Safety Local Income Tax Committee of the Monroe County Local Income Tax Council. Last year's committee chair, Ron Smith, is not serving on the committee, so the first order of business today will be to select a committee chair. Before we do that, I'll just note for the record who's here, so if we could just go down the line and state your name, that would be helpful.
Susan Sandberg, Bloomington City Council.
Jeff McKim, Monroe County Council.
Jim Sims, Bloomington City Council.
Lois Purcell, Steinsville City Council.
Scott Oldham, Ellisville Town Council.
And I believe we also have two committee members joining us via Zoom if they'd like to introduce themselves.
Isabel Piedmont Smith, Bloomington City Council. And I wanted to mention, I'm sorry, before we go to Kate, that I could not hear Sue, Lois, or Scott.
Sorry, we'll do
I'm
mic
Sue.
checks.
And I think it's just a matter of the mic getting close, I think. I'm Kate Welts, Monroe County Council, here because Marty Hawk could not be, although she's our official appointment.
Thank you. So first up, if there are any nominations for chair, now would be a time to make those.
If I may, I'd like to nominate Jeff McKim of Monroe County Council for chair.
Second.
All right, are there any questions or just go to a vote? See no questions. I think we can do a roll call vote given that we have members on Zoom. So committee member Scambolari?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
McKim?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Oldham?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
And Wiltz?
Yes.
All right, I'll turn it over to committee member McKim.
Thank you very much. I humbly accept. So we'll move right on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is an overview of local income tax rates, revenues, and distributions presented by Mr. Underwood, the City Controller.
Good afternoon, Jeff Underwood, City Controller, giving you my annual review of public safety lit. As you remember, under Indiana statute, the various forms of local income taxes were combined and now are called local income tax. There are 3 possible buckets that can be enacted: certified shares, which goes to the widest number of governmental units, as well as economic development and public safety lit. The public safety lit bucket was designed specifically to fund a local combined public service answering point, PSAP, or as we call it, central dispatch. And then after that distribution, it flows to 4 units of government for Monroe County, Ellisville, Steinsville, and the city of Bloomington under a preordained formula to distribute those remaining funds. In addition, the tax council has the ability to award to other qualifying providers under the statute. We have done that on 3 out of the last 6 years, distributions to them, and then primarily funded, as we said, central dispatch and then flows to the units of government. The average growth has been about 3.8% from 2017 was this first year of distributions. Last year was unique, just as a reminder to those that have been served before and to new folks, is because of the pandemic. In 2021, the state elected to have tax return filings extended from April 15th until August. And the cause and effect of that was we got an extra distribution in 2021 and then a smaller distribution in 2022. So when you look at the growth factor, the growth in 2021 was 9.3%, and then we had a negative 4.58% growth in that, but the average, it averaged out over the 2-year period. So it was just basically taking, instead of a 12 and 12 month distribution, it was more 18 months, and then the remainder in 2022. We expect that to even back out. The signs are that wages in Monroe County have grown somewhat and stayed strong. We've seen the food and beverage tax has bounced back to record numbers, and from every indication is the Monroe County area has strong employment and strong wage growth. So I would expect that we will see some growth in the lit. Hopefully it'll be close to the average, which I said has been 3.8%. One other thing I did want to point out that I don't believe we've spoken about in prior years, and this will factor in this discussion of the budget, is there is now a formula in place by the state that the state, when they collect local income tax, it goes into a trust fund, and then they certify distributions out of that. So it's the one tax that each unit of government that's eligible is guaranteed to get that amount for the full year. How they're able to do that is they keep in reserve in that trust fund enough money if there's a shortfall in the collections to make that up. That trust, that reserve had grown quite a bit over the years, so the legislature enacted a new formula that looks at by county the amount that should be allowed to stay in the reserve, and then they do supplemental distributions if it exceeds that amount. In Monroe County, we have gotten supplemental distributions since 2018, and in 2022, that distribution was $236,678, and I believe it was $236,678, and that just came out, and that was for dispatch specifically, and then the other units received a total of $668,056. So by my calculations, we've gotten an additional $1 million dedicated towards central dispatch related to the rate that was assigned each year from that. And again, then this group we will make a recommendation on a budget collectively, and then you all will review that as well as any potential other distributions, and then settle on the various rates that turns out to be. So it's been a wonderful addition. Again, thanks to all elected officials that have been around that enacted that tax and continue to support it. It's brought in dollars that we wouldn't have otherwise had for public safety. And I can speak directly for the city. It's helped us completely replace our equipment that was outdated. Many of it was unusable and had no other funding sources. So with that, I will stop and happy to take questions as I can.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Underwood. We'll see if there are any questions. We'll start on the left. How about on the right? And how about on Zoom? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you for that overview, Mr. Underwood. I just want to make sure I understand correctly the amount for the supplemental disbursement. You said it was $236,678 for PSAP.
Yes.
Is there an additional amount for the certified shares?
Not for, there was for certified shares. I don't have that. There was for additional public safety lit. The total of that for the 4 units amounted to $668,056.
And for certified shares, I do have that number in front of me. It was $1.3 million for the city. So the city received $1.3 million in supplemental, and the county received almost $1.4 million in supplemental, and all the units received some.
Yeah, and every unit gets that except for the school districts.
But I was trying to home in on the supplemental disbursement from the PS Lit funds.
Yeah, so that's
that was the $668,656 for each of the for subdivisions. of
Yeah, so it would be similar to the distributions, which I believe is about 48.5% between the city and the county, and the remainder Ellisville and a small amount to Steinsville.
The city received $341,949. By the way, you can just go to the DLGF webpage if you want to see the actual numbers. Go to the DLGF and look for county-specific reports, and it's under Monroe County, and you have all those exact numbers. So it'll give you basically the numbers that Mr. Underwood just recited, but it'll give you the specifics for each unit.
Yes. And
So,
that,
Mr. Underwood, in the city, sorry, this is kind of tangential, but, so we have an additional 1.3 million aside from PS Lit?
yes, that we just got.
Wonderful. We can chat later about that.
Yes, and we will, and we'll talk about that in August as well, so. One thing I did want to add is we will get information on the 2023 amounts by August 1st, and that will be unit specific as well as by category. So we'll have some additional information on that once it comes in to us on what the actual numbers are going to be.
Great, thanks. Before we let Mr. Underwood go, just any other questions? Nope, seeing none. Thank you very much. That was a useful presentation. We appreciate it. We'll move on to the report on Unified Central Dispatch expenditures. And I believe Amy Hensley is going to present.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, we're seeing several changes in dispatch. Thank you to the Novak report, which had recommended increased staffing. We've been working very hard to do that. And the city-county working group last year and the police administration both were very supportive of us trying to get salaries up. So we've been able to get the salaries up, which has certainly helped our staffing levels. So we still have a vacancy of 13 at this time, but we're having another hiring process in September, and we plan to finish the year with 9 vacancies, which should be full by the end of next year. The most we can take on at any time is a class of 4, because when you put 4 then into the center, it makes things pretty chaotic, especially while we're handling the actual emergencies, but trying to train at the same time. So, but our goal is to be fully staffed by the end of next year. So what that will give us a full staff of 43 FTEs by the end of next year. So most of the increase in what we will be spending on our budget for next year will be in personnel costs. The other things, as we are increasing personnel costs, we do have some capital replacement that we will be doing as we replace some things and as we work to expand our seating capability. Do you want to talk about numbers? I don't have an approved budget yet by the policy board.
Actually, that was just going to be my question, is just what is the status of the proposed budget and what are the next steps procedurally?
The city-county working group has come to a consensus that they are pleased with, and so we do have a budget that has met their approval that we will be turning into the policy board. The city-county working group recommendation to the policy board is to keep the PS Lit amount to 2.5 million, and the rest will be funded both through the 911 fund and then also some out of the dispatch reserve funds.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there, let's see, questions from the right? Any questions from the left? Any questions on Zoom? None. I guess Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, sorry.
Thank you. I couldn't get my raise hand button in time, so I just put up my hand the old-fashioned way. I wanted to ask Ms. Hensley, you referred to the Central Dispatch Reserve Fund. What is the balance in there?
Jeff?
Yes, I'll speak to that. There are two buckets. There is, and let me back up a little bit. Any receipts are distributed by the state to the county level, and then the county level on local income tax then distributes that based on the bucket and the unit of government. So all the money goes into, for PS Lit, goes into a fund at the county, and then they distribute to any outside providers if you all have awarded them money, and then to the city for public safety operations, the dispatch. And then we also get the distribution for our police and fire departments. The current agreement between the city and county to operate calls for that any unused funds, either in the county's fund, overall fund, or in the city's dispatch portion of the PS Lit, can be reused with agreement of at the recommendation of the working group and approval by the appropriate fiscal bodies. So the tax council, the city council, and the county council. So the proposal, as she said, will go to the policy oversight board, and we're proposing the city's reserve is approximately $1.358 million. So that's an accumulation of unspent funds over the year, primarily related to personnel costs as well as supplemental distributions. And we're proposing that we would use the majority of that in year one, and then begin to use down the counties. And the plan is to spend the reserves over a 3 to 4 year period. The good news is that means there'll be some hopefully additional funds, excess funds that flow back to the 4 units for theirs to spend. But once those reserves are spent, then it'll go back up to the necessary needs for the dispatch budget. The amount, the $2.5 million, without getting into detail, is about half of what the budget request is going to be. So we'll fund the remainder out of E911, the city's reserves, and then the county's account after that. We will recalibrate that every year then. So if there's any remaining reserve funds in the city side, and then we'll update what the county has as well. And then as we formulate future budgets, the plan is to continue to use those reserves so that we can keep the PSAP requests for PS Lit down or to an average, and then the monies will flow back to the 4 units.
And I will say that I'm very glad to see that the working group came up with that recommendation, that solution. I think there had been some money building up in those reserves that were keeping the tax rate probably higher than it needed to be. And just by my back of the napkin calculations, if the overall lit is the same in 2023 as in 2022, which it won't be, but if it were the same, this reduction in the amount of the dispatch budget coming out of PS Lit would basically give the city about $211,000 extra for in regular PS Lit for your budget, and then give the county about $190,000. So it's a fairly substantial amount of money that then reverts to the units to be able to spend on any public safety needs. So I'm glad that proposal seems to have been made.
Yeah, I would like to thank my fellow team members on the joint working group. It was very productive this year. We moved quickly through the review of the budget. I will say that I think Amy has a very good plan to get dispatch fully staffed. That will begin to eat into, I think we'll see less and less reversions, as we call them, unspent monies, because there's a need to have those folks staffed. Thanks again to this committee as well as the two fiscal bodies for the additional funds that we were able to apply to salaries. We think that we're in a very competitive state right now. We will continue to review that, our HR department, along with Chief Dekoff and Director Amy, to Hensley, to review those, to make sure that we stay competitive. If we see that we're not and we need to make adjustments, we certainly will make recommendations to the Dispatch Policy Board as well as this subcommittee for any adjustments that we might need to make. But we're hopeful to get them fully staffed, and we think that the additional salary monies that you all provided will make us competitive and able to fill those positions.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Ms. Henley from anyone? And did you have any other comments for us or anything else? Great. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
According to the agenda, well, there is an asterisk. Was the intention to have public comment on this item as well?
That's been the committee's practice in the past.
Okay.
I'll note we have one member of the public on Zoom. I don't see any in chambers, so if we'd like to offer an opportunity.
I would like to offer the opportunity to make public comment on the report on Unified Central Dispatch expenditures and their budget. Does anyone like to make public comment either in chambers or on Zoom? If you want to make, do you have them raise their hand on Zoom? Is that the protocol?
Yes.
Please raise your hand on Zoom.
Yes. No comment.
No comments. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next item, number 5, review of guidelines and application form. I believe that's you, Mr. Lucas.
Yes, thank you. So committee members should have last year's application and guideline sheet in your packet. I will note that the application form has been pared down the last couple of years due to the COVID-19 pandemic and a desire to make it easier for any eligible applicants to apply. I will note under state statute, any applications for funding from qualifying service providers has to be submitted before July 1st. So traditionally, there's been a deadline of June 30th at 12 noon. Last year, applications were accepted by the Bloomington Common Council office. No applications were actually submitted last year, and I believe the number of eligible applicants has decreased over the last several years. Mr. McKim may be able to confirm we may only have 3 or 4 still eligible. So the question I need you all to consider is any changes to the application form or the guidelines. And beyond just dates and I think contact information on the application form, there was one note on the guidelines that I thought warranted attention. Last year's committee, under number 2, under guidelines, revised the language to read currently, purpose of the expenditure, the committee will only consider funding expenditures for demonstrated urgent one-time emergency needs. And this committee, that language previously had been, I think, a little softer. I think previously it said the committee prefers to fund expenditures for demonstrated urgent one-time needs. And so that was, I think, the only change to the guidelines last year. As I mentioned, last year I think was the first year without any applicants. Previously there had been applicants that received no funding, but last year no one applied. So I thought the committee might want to consider whether it would like to retain this language or revert back to its old language. And of course, if there are any other changes that folks think are warranted to the application or guidelines, now is an appropriate time to bring that up.
Great, thank you. This topic has always been subject of robust discussion in the past. Why don't I see if there are any comments or thoughts from the left? Yes, Mr. Oldham.
I would be in favor of keeping the language exactly as it is. It tends to allow us to fill those emergent gaps, if there are any, without getting ourselves locked into a consistent funding stream for more long-range projects.
All right, thank you. Ms. Purcell?
No, I agree with Scott. I'm sorry, Councilman Oldham. But is there a benefit one way or the other, a perceived benefit? And and I understand what Scott says, but if we were to, is there a benefit to changing the language, I guess?
I think people on Zoom are having a hard time
Oh,
hearing.
I'm
You need to
sorry.
get up to the
Oh,
mic.
yeah. Mike wasn't
I'm
on.
sorry. My question was, is there a benefit to changing the language to soften it? I think it should be the way it is. I agree with Mr. Oldham, but I was just wondering if there's any benefits that we just don't see or I don't consider.
I don't know if that's directed at me. I don't know that this language change was the reason that the committee didn't receive applications last year. So it may have been part of that. I know the committee has also made recommendations at least the last 2 years, possibly 3, to not fund any requests for funding. So that could also play into folks feeling that their requests might not succeed.
Yeah, that language was kind of a compromise between what we had had before and then just not funding at all, was at least give them a chance if there is an emergency need that we weren't aware of, to give them that opportunity to apply.
As I recall, that robust discussion is what led to this more changing.
Yeah,
So, okay.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scambolari or Sandberg?
Yes, just thank you for the comments so far, and I would be inclined to agree that this language represented a good balance and brought some focus to the kinds of applications that would be compelling to us, and I think there's value in that. So I would support keeping it the same.
I would support it as well. No additional comments.
And looks like we have a comment from Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, gas prices have gone through the roof recently, and I wonder if extra funding, just theoretically, hypothetically, if that would be considered an urgent one-time need, if the emergency service provider didn't have enough in their budget for fuel for this year. I mean, it's hard to say that would be one time, but I thought maybe it would be wise to allow that. I don't know what others think.
I'll jump in just quickly. Just a reminder, this would be distributions for 2023, so not for 2022. And I just recently reviewed legislation where fire protection districts can apply for excess levy increases if the need's there, based on current expenses versus, I think it's over a 3-year period. So I would say that they have the ability to do that as well. And the other 4 units, especially in the city, are filling those impacts as well. So any funds that can flow down to us would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other debate from the left? Or from the right? Or from Zoom? I will say that I agree with Mr. Oldham. I think at this point that's a good standard. It does give us the ability to consider applications from a department if they really do have something urgent, but otherwise doesn't encourage them to just come up with needs to apply for. And then, of course, as Mr. Underwood pointed out, the city can always spend, and the town of Ellettsville can always spend the extra money that they would get then by not distributing it directly to the fire departments. They can still spend it on their fire protection. The county, it's a little bit different since we have the fire protection district that's its own taxing unit. And then there's always Bean Blossom, which I guess would be the remaining independent fire department. But if no one else has any comments, does anyone want to make a motion with respect to approving the same application process as we had last year?
And I'll just jump in. I will go ahead and update the dates, the year, and any future meetings that this committee schedules. So those will change in the application.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, oh, go ahead.
Excuse me. I will move approval of the guidelines and application form as corrected with dates and housekeeping issues.
We have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments from the left, from the right, from Zoom? Is there any public comment on this item, either in chambers or on Zoom. If you want to make a comment on Zoom, please raise your hand.
I believe I saw our one Zoom attendee walk down the hall just a moment ago, so he may not be with us.
Okay, seeing no public comments, we'll have a roll call vote.
I apologize. Committee member Scambolari,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
McKim,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Oldham,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Wiltz.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, schedule.
Yes, just a bit of process here. What will happen next is the council, Common Council Office will send out an email solicitation to any potential applicants with the application and guidelines you all just approved. In past years, this committee has scheduled an opportunity to review applications. In some years has invited presentations from applicants before making final recommendations. So I would suggest picking a date to, one, review any applications you do receive, and two, if you'd like to set aside a date for any presentations, you can do that now or say that that date will be scheduled in the future. And I believe the committee typically schedules the date in early August to make final recommendations shortly after the state releases its revenue estimates. So I would recommend picking at least 2 meeting dates, 3 if you'd like to provide for presentations. Last year, I believe the committee met in mid-July to review applications and picked out a date roughly a week later to allow for applications. I at least need you to pick the next meeting date, at least one, but.
Okay. Well, let's see, do you have a recommendation for a specific date, knowing the general constraints?
July 14th, given today's meeting, would be roughly when the committee met last year. That's a Thursday.
Well, 4 o'clock?
I'll be coming back from another country on that day, so I'm not available on the 14th.
Okay.
And one person probably won't stop it.
Well, would you like us to try to schedule around that, or to find a different
Yes,
date?
if there's something that's
Okay.
compatible with all of us.
Okay.
I'll throw out July 12th,
So that would be Tuesday.
Tuesday, July 12th.
It'll be after that. I'll be out of the country
Oh.
from like July 9th until the 15th.
Okay.
I'll throw out July 19th.
Until
So that's a Thursday also?
July 19th is a Tuesday.
Oh, a Tuesday, okay. I mean, I could do at 4, as long as it's out by 5:30. We always have either plan commission or county council, but. On the 19th? 19th is good?
We actually have a conflict on the 19th at 4, but we could meet by 4:30.
Or meet at 4:30, is that your suggestion?
At 4:30 with the timeout of when?
5:30 for Joe.
Okay.
And Councilmember Piedmont Smith has a thought also.
Yes, thank you. I'm a little confused. I have to admit, I was on this committee last year, but I missed the first meeting last year, so pardon me if I'm just not up to speed. But in previous years, we had left it to the county council, a subcommittee of the county council, to receive applications from the emergency service providers, if there were any, and meet and make recommendations to this body. So does our next meeting really have to be all of us?
Just a bit of history here. I believe last year's committee decided not to use that same process given the limited number of applications that may be submitted. I think given time constraints. So if the committee would like to revert to that process, that's open for discussion. But I know last year's committee discussed that at length and decided to simply proceed with consideration of applications by this body.
Okay, thank you. missed that.
That would be my recommendation, given the small number given that we really only have 4 fire departments and one of them is a city, to even consider. So the proposal right now is July 19th at 4:30 p.m. Is that correct? All right. Somebody, Councilmember Wiltz. You're on mute.
My apologies. So the call for applications would go out early this coming week, and then the deadline would be right before this next meeting. Is that how that works?
The call for applications may go out yet this afternoon if I'm that quick, but will go out tomorrow. The deadline for applications by statute is June 30th.
Okay.
And so
Wow.
after those applications are received, city council staff will package those up and distribute those to the committee members. And so the July 19th meeting, if that is in fact a good date for the committee, that will be an opportunity to review those applications.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I assume that by that time we may have a budget that's been approved by the dispatch policy board. Is that a possibility by that date? Is June 21st? Okay, so it sounds like it's a fruitful time for a meeting regardless. Okay, anybody want to make a motion?
Will that, just point of clarification, will that be here in council chambers?
It's the committee, or it's up to the committee. I think this room can serve.
Mr. Chair, I move that this committee next convene on Tuesday, July 19th at 4:30 p.m. here in council chambers.
Motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is anybody else want to comment? Okay, we'll do a vote on that, which I guess has to be roll call.
Yes. Committee member Scamboluri,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
McKim,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Oldham,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Wiltz.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Well, does anybody else have any other motions that they want to bring before this assembly?
I will just note the same meeting last year wound up being canceled, so if the committee is all right with the chair canceling this July 19th meeting if no applications are received, that was the practice last year. That's what I would recommend this year. If that meeting is canceled, the committee will need to schedule, I believe, at least one more meeting to discuss the exact amount that will be set aside for dispatch, and that's typically done in early August. So if we're not ready to schedule that meeting, we can work on that between now and then. So are there any objections to the chair being authorized to cancel July 19th's meeting if appropriate? Do you need a motion? I think no. If there are no objections, that's fine.
Okay, terrific. So if nobody else has any other business to bring before this assembly, we are adjourned. Thank you.